Hi everyone, welcome to Microsoft Ignite. My name is Aaron Powell, and in this session, we're going to be talking about Visual Studio Code and how we can use that as a tool for both students and educators. So this is very much going to be an education focused session, and I really want to bring in the Visual Studio Code and some other tools that we've got around that space to show you how powerful that can be. It would help if I can click onto the next slide. That will make the slide deck go a lot more efficiently, won't it? Anyway, so I'm going to talk a bit about what we've heard from students and educators with the tooling that they've previously or traditionally been using to do learning, whether it's online or in classrooms. And then we're going to introduce Visual Studio Code, talk about some of the things that make it a valuable tool for us to use. And then I'm going to finish off with a bit of a demo because, well, we didn't come here to just watch how people could do things on a PowerPoint deck. You came to actually see how we can do some coding. So without further ado, I want to talk about being a student. I was a student. It might have been a few years ago that I was in that position, but we know that it can be really intimidating when you're first coming into learning how to program, whether it's in a high school classroom setting, tertiary education, universities and colleges. It can be really daunting. There's so many things that you're trying to learn. So we want to make it as easy for you to get started, to learn the things that you need to learn, and not be too focused around all the stuff that you don't have as much control over. So we've done a lot of work talking with students and educators just to make sure that we understand what their needs are so that when we produce the tooling that we've got, we're producing tooling that is right for them, not what we've believed to be correct for them. When we've talked with students, they've said a number of different things, but some of the key ones that spoke out to us were that they don't like this idea of having to install a variety of different tools. One class you might be taking, you're learning how to do Java, and the next one Python, and the one after that CSS and HTML. And you've got different tools for each of those. You really just want one tool that you can use that can tackle all of the needs that you've got for the classes that you're taking. And you want to be able to get up and running quickly. No, not spending a whole day trying to install software, install the specific runtimes, development environments, and supplementary tooling that you're going to need. You want to just have it all there, easy and ready to go. And even better, if it's the way that the educator, if your lecturer or your professor has said, this is how I'd like you to set up your computer. And you want something that feels like yours. You want it to be personalizable. Some of us prefer light themes versus dark themes. Some of us have particular color requirements that we have because we might have color blindness and we can't see color contrasts in the same manner as everyone else. So we want to make sure it is the tool that we want to use. Because if the tool makes you feel good to use, you're going to feel more comfortable using it. And we want it to be real world. Make sure it's the sort of stuff that you are going to do. And that's really what the educators have been telling us. Too often, students are being told, install all of these different tools, and they're so different to what they're going to go out and use in industry. As someone who has done a lot of training of people, both in classroom and online, being able to give someone a way to set up an environment really quickly is so much more valuable. And this is something we heard from educators. They can spend a lot of time going around and sitting with individual students, making sure that they've got the right version of Python. As they accidentally installed Python 2.7 when they're really needing 3.8, and making sure that everyone's environment is the same. Or they might be working in a classroom lab setting where they don't have access to actually install stuff. That can be really challenging as a student and frustrating as an educator because you just want your students to be able to do the work and be confident in doing that. And even more important at these times where we're doing everything remotely is having a tool that can allow you to do that collaboration. Work with your peers, your fellow students, even if it's a group assignment experience, where you can have them collaborating together, not trying to hunt around a single laptop because, well, we know that's actually really hard to do right now. So we want to make sure that that is as easy as we can make it. So what is Visual Studio Code? Well, Visual Studio Code is a tool that we've got that we're trying to use to address a number of these concerns. It's a text editor, and we've got different spectrums of what text editors can be. You've got really simplistic editors, things like Notepad at one end of the spectrum. It's there, it can work, it just edits text files, but it's not particularly engaging or exciting to use because it's designed to edit text files. And then at the other end of the spectrum, we've got our IDEs or integrated development environments. Things like Eclipse, Visual Studio. These are big, complex applications that are really powerful and offer a lot of functionality, but can be very daunting to get started with. And when you've installed a piece of software and it's many gigabytes worth of install, well, you know that it's doing a lot, but you need all of it right now. Well, that's where Visual Studio Code comes in. It sort of fits in between those two, I guess, spectrums of software that we've got. It's a lightweight text editor that is designed to be used with any language. Whether you're building something in Python or C++, Java, or web development, we've got the tool there for you. You can customize it for your needs. Install the extensions that you need to support the languages that you're working on, the runtime environments, and customize it to make it your own personal editor. You can do as much customization as you want or as little as you want. And it's also designed to work across all operating systems, Windows, Linux, and Mac OS. So regardless of what computer you've got and what you're using, you can have the same experience in any location, and you'll have the same experience that your peers are also using. We can even do Visual Studio Code from the browser with Codespaces. We'll take a look at both of those in action in a little bit, but I've got a few other things that I want to talk about before we jump over and start some demos. We really want to go and ensure that you've got that ability to collaboratively work with your peers. You know, whether it's working on a group assignment or you're preparing for going into the real world where you're doing pair programming with your colleagues. We wanted to build a tool for that. And this is called LiveShare. LiveShare is a series of extensions that you install into your editor that allow you to set up a remote development environment from your machine that other people can connect into. So as a student, if I'm having trouble with something and I need my professor to have a look at it, I can create a LiveShare environment, give them the URL for them to access, and work directly with me, as though they were sitting next to me at my desk. But as we know right now, that's very difficult to do, so they can be doing it from the comfort of their home office as well. But as an educator, this is also a really powerful tool. And we might be presenting something on a slide deck or on a screen that's behind us, and that is okay for most people to read, but maybe someone's having trouble following along, or people want to be able to dive around the code base as you're presenting it in their own time. So we can set up as a presenter a LiveShare experience that to our students that are in the classroom or in the virtual classroom really, and they can then connect in and then have a look around. We can do that in a read-only fashion because maybe we don't want our students going in and modifying the code while we're trying to teach them how to run it, but we can give them that access and have up to 30 people all sharing the same editor experience. And they don't need anything more than a web browser to attend that. But then there's the idea of being able to simplify the development environment. And we can do that using our remote extensions, specifically remote containers. A containerization is the idea of being able to create a little box, I suppose that's why it's called a container, using Docker, that we can then put an entire development environment in there. So maybe you are working on a specific version of Python, but you've got a different one installed on your desktop. Well, we don't want to have you install some more software. We can give you a little Python container, which has the correct version that we've set up in there. Inside of that, you would also have your application, the assignment that your teacher has provided for you, and then all of the dependencies that you would need. Things like Visual Studio extensions that you might want to make that all work. So this is how we can then provide that to you as like educator to student, so that we don't have to spend a lot of time making sure that you can set up your environment to get ready and start working. And then finally, we've got Codespaces. Codespaces is a tool that allows us to run Visual Studio Code, but entirely from the browser. No more even installing anything beyond a browser on your machine. So you can do something on as lightweight a device as a tablet, like an iPad or a Surface Duo, and just have an external keyboard connected to that. And you get your full editor experience the same way as you would have it as though you're working directly within a natively installed application. As I said, you weren't here to just see me talk through a series of slides. You're actually here to see some demos. So let's jump over to Visual Studio Codespaces. We'll start there. So here's Visual Studio Codespaces. I've created this from GitHub. So I've started with, this is Codespaces, and I've started with GitHub. So from GitHub, I've gone to a repository that I've got. So this is the sample application. You can also grab this one later as well if you want to have a play around with it. I can click on the button here that would normally allow me to export this down onto my machine and clone the Git repo, but I can choose Open with Codespaces. Now, I've already created a Codespace that we're going to be using here. So we'll jump over to that one. It'll take a few minutes initially to set up because it stands up the whole environment for you. But because I wanted to speed up this demo a little bit, I've set it up beforehand. So here's our Codespace. It has all the things that we would want from an editor. We've got folders and files and things like that. If I compare that to Visual Studio Code, so here's what I've got installed on my machine. It looks pretty much the same, doesn't it? I've even got the same color themes set up. Now, this is the color theme that I'm using inside of my Visual Studio Code environment. I could change it, and maybe we'll change that a little bit, just so that we can check which one it is, because I'm going to do some pair programming, but I'm going to do pair programming with myself. So it might be easier if we can work out, who's who in our two editor experiences. Now, inside of my VS Code instance here, I've got extensions, and this is really where the heart of VS Code is and allows us to customize it in the way that we need. I've got a whole bunch of things that are installed, things like remote development or live share. So I could use live share to create that environment so that my my lecturer or my peers could be able to connect in and work with me. I've already got that extension installed, but normally I would come in, I would search for it with live share here, select it as an option and click the install button. And this will install all the dependencies that I need available within inside of my machine. And then this is a text editor. So I've got a Python application here, and we're going to be, I'm going to pretend that this is something that's been assigned to me by my lecturer. Now I need to have Python installed. So if I open up the terminal, and on my machine, I'm just going to type Python in a moment once the terminal starts up. Oh, unfortunately, I don't actually have Python installed. Now, normally I would have to go out and I would have to download Python from the internet, make sure I got the correct version. But do I know which version I want to have running on my machine? I'm not quite sure which one I was told to install. So maybe I'll just grab the one that seems to be the most common downloaded. Hopefully it's the right one. And this is where it can start becoming daunting as a student. I'm not quite sure if I've done the right thing. But that's where our remote containers extension comes into play. And I'll come back to my extensions, search for remote containers, wait for it to catch up. Here we go. There we go. Just a little bit delay in the internet and we'll do some tap dancing around while things download. But here we go. I have the remote containers extension already installed. So normally I would go ahead and install that. And what it's going to do is add a new little icon down into the bottom, which is being hidden away by my task menu. There we go. I've got this lovely little icon down here, which is purple or gray, depending if I'm hovered over it. I can also go into the command palette with Control-Shift-P, or on a Mac it would be Command-Shift-P. And then I could type remote containers. Yeah, and I'm actually going to reopen this project in a container. So this is going to restart my development environment. Oops. And it's going to error out. And this is the fun of live demos, isn't it? That things are going to potentially go wrong. And that's part of the reason why we come and watch people present live, isn't it? To make sure that we can catch when something might have gone wrong for them. So we'll just give a moment for my external dependencies to start up. While that's happening, I'll jump back over to Codespaces. So Codespaces, it's the same sort of editor experience. I can open the file, our Fibonacci application here. I'll click onto it and we'll see that we get the same sort of syntax highlighting, the colorization that I had. And again, this is now running a different theme, just so I could show that we can have things different depending on where we are. As all my notifications pop open, I will just slowly dismiss them. I can run this application, do all the things that I want to do. I even have access to the debugger. So I could start a debugging session from the browser. Like, I've not installed anything to do this. I'm working on my application. Okay, I'm just going to see if we have got everything up and running so that we can start our remote container. And come back here. Open up remote containers. Hopefully things are up and running. If not, we'll actually use the browser as our starting point. No, it seems that Docker doesn't want to play nice for me today. Like I said, it's the joys of live demos is that we make sure things are working the way that we really hope they would work, but every now and then they don't do that. So come back over here. Now, the way that Codespaces works is that it will start up a Docker container for you. Now, this Docker container is by default containing a whole lot of stuff that we want in there, but my lecturer wants me to use a specific Docker container or a specific set of things inside of that Docker container. So they've provided this .dev containers folder up here. Now, if I open this up, there's two files inside of here, a dev containers.json and a Dockerfile. So let's open up the Dockerfile. This Dockerfile is actually a pretty simplistic one. All it's doing is it's saying that we're expecting an argument to be passed in, and by default, it's going to have the value of 3. And then it's going to say that we're using the dev containers for Python, and then using that, that variable that's passed in. So this is saying that it's going to use the version 3 Python dev container that we have provided. And that's all it's doing. The real magic is inside of the dev containers.json file. So we've got a name, Python 3. We've got a location for a Docker file, some arguments, but then my professor has provided me with a series of settings. It's got what is the default terminal, where is Python installed, and a bunch of other things to normalize the environment for all of the students. They've even gone ahead and said, I expect you to have the Python VS Code extension installed. So I didn't even need to install that myself. The dev container, when it starts up, will automatically install that for me. Fantastic. So now, if I was to run in my here, we'll actually have the ability to execute our application. So let's come into the folder, and then we're going to run Python and fib, which is the file name, fib.py. Excellent. Okay, so now we want to print out the Fibonacci sequence, because that's what we're doing. Now, the Fibonacci sequence is going to be a series of numbers, and we need to tell it how many numbers in that sequence we want. So let's just do 5. Oh dear, that's actually giving me a series of negative numbers. So first 5 positive numbers in the, so something's gone amiss here. And this is where I probably want to be able to call up my professor or a fellow student and ask them to help me debug this. So to do that, I can start a live share environment. So I'll click live share, which I've got here already installed, and it actually installs with Codespaces. And I can start a read write or read only session, or I can join someone else's live share. So we're going to start a read write session just to show you how this works. So this will start up, and we'll see that at the moment it's setting up a collaboration session for people to join. There we go. That should be open ready in a moment. Excellent. And then I will copy the URL when it's made available to me. Any minute now. So what this will do is the URL then gives anyone the ability to connect into it. So let's open up. I'm going to open up another profile. Pop this one over to the side. So we'll do side-by-side code instances. There we go. Now, did I get my live share URL? No, we'll come back here, and then I can click the copy collaboration link, paste that into the browser. Okay, so with live share, it's saying, where do I want to open this? I can open it into Visual Studio Code. I can open it into Visual Studio Code in the full Visual Studio, or I can open it in the browser using Codespaces. Now, because I've already got one Codespaces open, I'm going to actually open it in Visual Studio Code on my desktop. So what this will do is pop up a new application, which is naturally going to be on the screen that I'm currently not projecting, but we'll find that in a moment. It's somewhere. Let's actually connect multiples. We'll also connect in the browser. So we'll have 3 personalities of myself all editing the same environment. We'll close that welcome page so they don't need that anymore. And in our Codespace, sorry, not in our Codespace, in our live share experience, because I've set this up as a read-write one, I'm going to be able to edit in one location and have that flow through directly to the next, to the other editor. Here we go. It is actually opening up in VS Code on my desktop. So there we go. We'll open those up side by side because I think it's cooler if we can show not just everything in the browser, but how the browser and a desktop application could work together. Now we'll give it a moment while that loads in. And with a Codespace, I can also do other things such as I can share the terminal. So where I was actually executing the application, I can share that across across the live share to the other people that are connected. So if I'm running the application, they can see the live running output. I can also start up a chat session. So this is just natively within inside of the live share environment. We can do chat. So I can talk to the other participants if we don't have a video call going. I can even start an audio call with them. So if we wanted to be able to talk to each other, we didn't have Microsoft Teams running in the background. I could easily just do that all from my editor. I don't need to install a bunch of other software to achieve this. Okay, all of these are taking a little bit longer than I was hoping for them to take. I'm going to sign in onto this one. We'll call that Aaron in the browser, just so we can see where everyone's at. Close off all the various notifications. Wait for one of these. I really wanted to do this penultimate demo at the end, but unfortunately, I think I might nearly be running out of time because that's always the case, is that live demos, something goes wrong and then you start running out of time. And I do want to make sure that we are able to take Q&A that we have at the end. So I'll just jump over and see how we're tracking with Q&A as well while we're waiting for everything to start running. Now, I did see a question came in earlier about whether or not, about how we can use the Windows subsystem for Linux to work with Visual Studio Code. Now, what you might not have noticed when I did the initial load up here of the code that I've got here, this is actually running in the WSL support for VS Code. You'll see that right down here in the corner. Might be a little bit tricky to see, but especially if my start menu hovers over the top of it, I'm actually running this as a remote experience against my own WSL environment. So with the remote extensions that we have in VS Code, we have a number of different ways that can work. You can have remote containers, which is Docker on your machine or a remote Docker environment. We have remote WSL, so connect to the WSL environment on your machine, the Windows subsystem for Linux. We can also do remote via SSH, which means that if I was connecting to a Linux environment elsewhere, maybe I'm connecting onto a server or onto maybe a Raspberry Pi because I'm doing IoT development, I can connect through to that. And then we've got Codespaces where I can connect through to a Codespace environment from our desktop application. Now, here we go. We now have our editor and my stalling tactics have worked successfully. We've been able to connect and we'll see that we have myself here in the editor. Let me just close off that. So we've got a bit more space as we navigate around. And there's a little purple caret or cursor key that we can see up there. And that is my screen on the right-hand side. So as this one is to navigate around, you'll see on the left-hand side, my name is bouncing around because that's where I'm going and like the cursor is moving to. I can also put in a comment and say, hello from VS Code. So I can actually edit the file remotely and then have that real-time collaboration happen to everyone else that's connected to the Codespace. So we can even share our terminals and things like that. Now, putting on the hat of the professor and or a fellow student and saying, well, I can see that the problem that you might have with your Fibonacci sequence is that we need to be able to print out the numbers 0, 1, 1, 2, 3, because that's the first 5 numbers, because it's always the sum of the 2 previous numbers. But here, it looks like, well, maybe you're only catering for the very first number, 0. So if we just change this to less than or equals to, save that file, and that change is immediately reflected across to my all my environments. And then if we can run it again, type in 5, and now we get the correct output. So I was able to remotely support someone working in VS Code, or in this case, even in VS Codespaces. Sorry, in Codespaces. So they were in VS Code through Codespaces because they were working directly in the browser. So that's what I wanted to cover off from a demos standpoint today. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. If you've got any questions, feel free to reach out to us at the Twitter handle @code, which is the VS Code Twitter handle. Check out VS Code at code.visualstudio.com. And if you want to try out Codespaces, that's in beta, and you'll need to sign up for that at github.com/codespaces, I think it is. And that will allow you to sign up for the beta program. Now, I see a couple of questions that started to come in. So the first question is around the collaboration and version control. So how would you do version control in a collaboration environment? The way that it works is that the owner of the source control provider is the machine that started the live share experience. So in the case where I have the Codespace on one side and VS Code natively on the other, the only place that I could do a commit to Git, so this is running Git as the source control provider behind the scenes, that will happen through the Codespaces environment, and it will happen as the user that's signed in there. Now, because it's a Git repository underneath, if I was to edit other files, then they would obviously be tracked locally, and I suppose we could do that using our local environment. It is getting a little bit tricky because it's all the one person trying to pretend to be two people. But yes, the owner of committing to source control is the person who started a live share session. Now, the next question is, can we collaborate between Codespaces? Definitely. So the Codespaces is actually working very similar to the way any of our other remote extensions work. So it runs VS Code essentially in a remote environment, and you connect to it through a browser rather than through your local editor. Now, you can actually connect your local editor as well if that was the you can do all of that as you would normally do. So if I wanted to connect one Codespace to another, definitely able to do that. And in fact, that's what I was starting up here, but the collaboration session failed to start. But this is a Codespace here on the right-hand side and on the left-hand side, and they would normally have been talking to each other. So the next question from Thomas is, when will Codespaces be out of beta? That I don't actually have any information on at this point in time. It will happen at some point, but yeah, unfortunately, I don't know when it will be out of beta. Then there's another question about accessing repositories through the browser. That's essentially the goal with Codespaces. Like I said, I started with a repository here in GitHub. From there, rather than using cloning with GitHub for desktop or opening in Visual Studio, I chose to open it in Codespace, and that launched it within the browser, meaning that I have the full power of VS Code as an editor experience, but running entirely within inside of the browser. So yeah, it does mean that you have all of that power and that value there. It's just treated as another remote environment. And again, if it's been set up with a dev container, then that dev container will be the one that's used and sets up the environment that you're going to be running within. And in this case, it set up the Python environment for me, so I got the correct version of Python, whereas I don't even have Python locally. So in this environment here. And if I was to start a debugging session in my Codespace, I would be able to debug it also in real time using a Codespace, using a live share session that's connected remotely. So there's another question about, can I use this with my team to collaborate even though it's in beta? Definitely. We would love to get people's feedback on this. So I really encourage you to sign up for the beta program, give Codespaces a try, help us understand what works ideally for you and where there are things that you would like to see added as feature support for a Codespace. Because the only way that we can make the product even better for the needs that you have as students, as educators, as people, as IT professionals in industry, is to know precisely what you're trying to do with it and to get that feedback from you. So yes, please sign up, try it, and let us know what you think. I think we're just about out of time. Thanks everyone for joining today. Thanks everyone for the questions that you've asked. I hope you've learned something. I hope you've seen that through Codespaces and LiveShare and remote extensions, we can make a really powerful, collaborative, predefined development experience for students, educators, and IT professionals.